Hello, I'm John Ruzek. I'm with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and thanks for joining us today for this conversation about COVID and marriage. I'll be talking with Professor Steve Harris of the College of Education and Human Development, Department of Family Social Science. But first, powered by our members and donors, the Alumni Association is proud to bring you online conversations with university faculty, staff, alumni, and students. And if you're interested in learning more about the Alumni Association, visit us at umnalumni.org. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Steve Harris, who is a professor in couple and family therapy with the Department of Family Social Science here at the University of Minnesota's College of Education and Human Development. Welcome, Steve. Would you be willing just to kind of give a little bit about your background and a little bit more of what you do at the Department of Family Social Science?
You bet. Thanks for having me today. I've been at the University of Minnesota for about 10 and a half years. Prior to coming to Minnesota, I was a professor of marriage and family therapy at Texas Tech University. So moving from West Texas to Minnesota has been quite a shift for me. Although not entirely unfamiliar with cold. I'm Canadian originally, and I've lived most of my life in cold climates. Lived in Finland for a while, and so I've loved being back here in this part of the world, and love the weather and love everything about living in Minnesota.
Awesome. Well, welcome back to the North. I understand when we were talking before we went live, talking a little bit about how you've just published an article about the current COVID situation, but some of the unique stressors that come with marriage during these times. And that's the reason we're talking today. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that article.
And one of the hats that I wear, John, is I do research in divorce decision making, and I'm the associate director of the Minnesota Couples on the Brink project, where we've developed a protocol for working with couples who are on the brink of divorce to help them see if there's a way to repair their relationship or if they need to decide to move in a different direction. So one of the things that we know is that when couples are under high stress for long periods of time, their marital satisfaction decreases. And the COVID-19 pandemic offers and the subsequent quarantines and stay-at-home orders that we are experiencing here in Minnesota and others will be experiencing in our nation represent a unique blend of acute stress, when someone is exposed to something in rapid onset, and chronic stress when something kind of lasts for a long period of time. And we know that human beings have typical responses in relation to stress, both acute and chronic stressors. And this COVID-19 really is a perfect storm of both of these kinds of stressors, where at any moment we might be responding to something that's acute and kind of more in our face, and it's also kind of long and drawn out, and we're spending a lot of time together. A lot of us manage our relationships pretty well when we're not kind of in close quarters. In fact, one of the news pieces I read recently was that in China, as a result of the 30-day mandatory quarantine, that their divorce petitions have gone up in a particular province, and they're suggesting that these underlying issues came out when people were sharing close quarters. So I did write a piece for the Institute of Family Studies blog that talked a little bit about how to manage the stressors of being together, being confined, so this time period doesn't take a toll on your marriage and the close relationships that we have. So one of the things I want to point out is that when human beings get stressed, we tend to do more of the same. So if I'm typically kind of a lock it down and control it kind of guy, if that's the way I kind of approach the world, I go into kind of hyper-vigilant mode, and I try to even lock down things even more, try to control things. So I might be the person who's out buying all the toilet paper, and all the groceries, instead of kind of looking at it and saying, well, we probably need to figure out how to get by for the next month, but we don't need a year supply of toilet paper. So, and if you're more kind of like, well, can't really do much about this situation, let's sit back and see how it goes, sometimes those people tend to get a little bit even more laissez-faire in their attitude and their approach to it. And you can imagine that oftentimes in couples, we have a person at one end of the continuum and another person at the other end of the continuum. Sometimes that makes for a great and dynamic complementarity in a relationship. But when we're stressed and we're kind of going to the polar extremes of how we react, that can really stress a marriage out, and a partnership out. And why won't you take me more seriously? And why do you get so worked up? You know, these can be the kinds of arguments that couples can get into. And the other thing that's important to know in being part of a member of a couple, we believe as family therapists and family scientists that couples develop over time kind of a way of relating to each other. Some of those are more healthy and some of those are less healthy. Specifically, there are some negative couple interactions that couples can get by with on occasion, but when you're stressed, and we tend to do more of the same, we kind of repeat patterns or amp up the patterns that we already have. And so some of those patterns that couples can get into are, we give them particular names, like a pursue distancer pattern. So this is the couple where one person has something they want to talk about. They approach their partner, and their partner's like, can we talk about that later? And, you know, and then that one person seems to keep pursuing and follows their partner from room to room, trying to engage in this conversation. That can be incredibly frustrating to both people. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But when couples get to a negative place in their relationship, one person can end up feeling like, I'm trying to engage you and you keep leaving me hanging. And the other person's feeling like, you keep nagging me, you keep badgering me. So understanding that pursue distance pattern and being able to kind of modify it a little bit. There are other patterns we talk about are when both people in the couple tend to withdraw from each other in times of stress. Or so this is the person who goes off to the bedroom and the other person's down in the basement, maybe on the computer or something like that, kind of both retreating to their own sanctuaries. And then things that need to be talked about, things that need to be discussed or planned for, don't get addressed at all. We also have patterns where people will kind of attack each other. You know, sometimes they say things that they use harsh tones. They say things that maybe should be left unsaid. The attacks get personal. Those can be extremely damaging. A colleague of mine, John Gottman, talks about those being kind of the sulfuric acids of relationships when couples get really critical and contemptuous with one another in that way. Or attack withdraw, when one person attacks and the other just kind of leaves. It can leave both people feeling unresolved. So understanding that couples typically develop a pattern of interaction over time, and that in times of stress, these patterns of interaction can be unhealthy. They can become amplified as well. I think the other thing that I would want people to know is that when you are in a quarantine, when you are in a stay-at-home order, that you should be intentional about keeping your routine, planning the day out, striking a balance between work obligations and childcare. Now, maybe because childcare centers have been shut down or inaccessible, now we're having to work and provide childcare all within the same environment. And so having good communication about whose turn it is to get the baby, whose turn it is to kind of monitor. I'm on a conference call right now. Can you cover this while you have different work obligations? So being intentional about that and having conversations about that would be really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, I just had that conversation with my wife before we started recording this. So
right. And we can go about our day thinking, oh, here's my day, but we don't typically talk to our partner about what is specifically going on at their place of work. And so now we have to combine like my university responsibilities with my wife's, interior design responsibilities. And so trying to figure out who gives and who takes is important. And I think the good thing is that in this stay-at-home quarantine kind of environment, I almost feel like most of us are being a little more patient with one another. We're understanding that all bets are off, and workplaces are saying things like, if you can get to it, great. If you can't, that's fine too. If it takes a longer day. And the other thing that I'm noticing myself is, although my calendar is blank, I don't really have as many scheduled meetings and things like that. I feel like I'm working more, but not getting as much done. And because of the constant breaks and things like that. And this is something that I'm hearing from other people. They're like, yes, that's exactly true. I don't have anything scheduled, but I'm working, and it's not just an 8-hour day now. Now it's a 14-hour day. I don't seem to get a break. So just talking to your partner about that same kind of a dynamic, that we're both going through this thing, that we're not experiencing a fulfillment the way we would at work. And luckily for many of us, our employers are being extremely understanding, forgiving, willing to be accommodating for the circumstances that we're in right now. I think the other thing that is interesting is thinking about, couples where one is maybe more extroverted, the other might be more introverted. Um, you know, I saw a meme the other day that said, "Hey, all you introverts, put your books down. Your extroverted friends are dying." Now dying, obviously not dying, but they're suffering because they have to stay at home. And so, uh, introverts and extroverts, they kind of recharge in different ways. And just because you're an introvert doesn't mean that you're really loving the social isolation. Introverts also need people. They just need them in different doses. And so to feel recharged and to feel connected. So understanding a little bit about yourself, how do you approach the world, and how do you recharge socially is important. And to be understanding that your partner has certain needs around those things might be interesting. I think the other thing, depending on how old your kids are, you probably should be having conversations with them to kind of manage household stress. If you've got children, whether they're college age or grade school or middle school, have developmentally appropriate conversations about what COVID-19 is, what it represents. There might be a lot of fear. We might have a news cycle going on all day long in the background. That can certainly, kids will pick up on that. They'll be hearing things. Even young kids will be wondering. So maybe turning the TV off, having a family council, and answering questions about what people know, what people don't know about COVID-19, what family members are at risk. Why can't we go over to grandma and grandpa's house? And we can talk about the risk of spreading infection and things like that. But having some intentional time where the entire family comes together, having intentional time where the couple who kind of run the family come together, and other leaders in the family come together and say, this is the strategy, this is where we're at. I think those things will be really important, because this is a stressor. We do tend to react in certain ways to it. So knowing yourself, knowing your partner, being able to have times when it's calm and you guys can connect would be really important.
That's all just great, wonderful advice. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to share the screen again with, that has the link, that z.umn.edu marriage COVID hyperlink that goes right to the article that you were mentioning.
Great.
Yeah, and just in closing, obviously you're a professor in the College of Education and Human Development, cehd.umn.edu. But maybe just talk, I know you're also involved with the Couples on Brink of Divorce.
Couples on the Brink project, yeah.
Yeah, project with the Department of Family Social Science. So just any other websites or projects that you'd like to talk about that you're involved with here at the University of Minnesota?
Well, the two things that I'm involved with are the Minnesota Couples on the Brink project and also the National Divorce Decision Making Study. One of the things that we've been doing recently is we've been publishing more on what's going on when couples are in the middle of that divorce decision making process. We knew a lot about what causes divorce. We know a lot about the transitions and adjustments that have to happen to adjust to a divorce situation successfully for adults and children. But we didn't know a lot about, prior to 2015 when we started this study, we didn't know a lot about what people were thinking about. And one of the things we're finding out is divorce tends to start with a very small idea. It tends to stay with people for a very long period of time. They usually don't make snap decisions. They worry about their kids, the impact that the divorce decision will have on their kids. They worry about their financial situation. They also wonder how much love and how much happiness should I have in my life? So all these what we call the big four: kids, money, happiness, and love, all tend to be part of the ongoing equation that people are trying to balance. They feel a lack of clarity and confidence when making this decision, and that's really why we developed a counseling protocol called discernment counseling, where couples have an opportunity to kind of engage in a couples counseling type of process that doesn't require them to immediately work on their relationship. It creates some space for them to think about the decision, to arrive at a greater sense of clarity and confidence before jumping into that decision making, before making that decision. And really, we're finding a lot of success with that. A lot of people who are appreciative of the approach that gives couples space and slows down the divorce machinery just so they can really clear their heads and be well grounded before they make a decision. That's going to be a long-term decision that has ramifications for everybody involved. So those are the things that I'm involved with right now in the Family Social Science Department. I would say also, John, that there are a lot of counseling resources for those who are feeling a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress with the current season of the stay-at-home orders. Most employees, a lot of employers have employee assistance programs. I saw that our university put out an ad about the employee assistance program that are ready and available to take online appointments and things like that. So it's probably a good resource for people to think about going through their employee assistance program to get help if they're feeling especially stressed out at this time of this pandemic that we're living through.
Well, thank you so much for those tips and sharing your insights and all that you're doing here at the University of Minnesota. And thanks to everyone who's been listening, and we'll see you down the road.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Take care, everyone.